Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. Today I'm going to be creating some spring and Easter home decor. For my first project, I'm going to be using this egg carton that I had lying around the house. I'm sure a lot of us have these. I'm going to begin by cutting off the piece on the right hand side there and also then separating the lid from the base. Next, I'm going to separate this into two sections of 6. I'm just using my craft knife to cut down the center part, and then I'm also going to cut off the end pieces. Now I'm only going to be using one of these groups of 6, but I will keep that other one in my stash. I'm sure I will be able to use it in another project. So I'm just using a combination of my craft knife and my scissors. And then once I have that end cut off, I did also decide to cut it down even further. I want to be able to see the eggs that I'm going to be putting in this a bit better, and those sides I think would obstruct the view of those a little bit too much. So I'm just going around and trimming these sides down. I'm then going to be using some foam eggs that I had in my stash. These are all the same size. I got these from a website called Riot Art, but you can get these in a lot of different places, a lot of craft stores. I'm going to be using Spanish Sunrise on one of the eggs first. I ended up doing 2 coats of this to get the coverage that I wanted. I'm going to be using a couple of different colors on my eggs for my little egg carton craft, but obviously you can come in with whatever colors suit your project. I'm then going to be using Paint Couture's Autumn Sage chalk paint. Again, I ended up doing 2 coats on this, and I really do love the combination of yellow and green, and I really feel like they pair beautifully together. I'm then going to be using Paint Couture's Duck Egg chalk paint. I ended up doing 2 coats on this one as well. To balance the color scheme, I'm then going to be using Paint Couture's Italian Ivory, and I'm going to be using that on 3 of the eggs. So we have 3 different colored eggs and then 3 that are in this more neutral Italian Ivory mineral paint. And again, I did do 2 coats on each of the eggs. When those were dry, I then moved on to adding some hot glue to the egg cartons, and I'm going to be pressing in this sort of almost coconut fiber style material that I had in my stash. You can get this from a lot of floral websites. And then I'm going to just use the end of a paintbrush to help push that in so that I don't burn myself on that hot glue. And I'm just putting little clumps of it into each of the egg holes in my egg carton. Once I'd finished adding that textured material to the base of my egg carton, I then started adding glue to the bottom of each of my eggs. So I'm going to be spacing out the colored eggs and having the cream neutral eggs sort of in between them so that it wasn't sort of overloaded with all cream on one side and all colored on the other. Again, if you're going to give this a try, obviously you can customize this to suit your taste. So I'm just going to continue to glue the eggs down by just adding some hot glue to the bottom of each one. Once I'd finished gluing the eggs in, I then went around with my scissors and trimmed off some of that excess material that was sticking out around the base. I then began adding some hot glue to the center part of the egg carton and into some of the little gaps there between the eggs, because I'm then going to be adding some Spanish moss. So the glue is going to help hold that in place. And again, just using that paintbrush to press that down. And I'm going to continue adding this in between each of the eggs. I really love the extra texture that this brings in. It definitely has that feeling like it's like a nest, or maybe that was in the chookyard when the eggs were collected. I just really love the natural elements in this project. I wanted to hide a little bit more of the egg carton sides, so I did add a line of hot glue around the outside and added a little bit more of that Spanish moss so that it looked a bit more like it was sort of creeping and falling out from the center. And I'm going to repeat the same process for the other side of the egg carton. To add a little bit more interest and realism to the eggs, I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Pitch Black Chalk Paint. I'm going to get some on a brush, and then I'm going to sort of flick the bristles of the brush over the top of the eggs just to get some random speckles. I really love this touch. I definitely think that it enhances the look of the eggs. When that was dry, I took out my twine. I'm going to be tying a bow, but first I want to lay the twine down the center, then have it crisscross over the back, almost like how you tie a present. And then I'm going to bring it up over the top of the eggs in the center. I'm going to trim off the twine there, and then I'm going to tie a double knot. After trimming off the excess twine, I then took out this cardboard tag that I had in my stash, and I'm going to trim down the sides of it though because it is a little bit big for my project, and then I'm going to trim off the end as well. I'm then going to be using Redesign's Easter stamp. I really liked the Happy Easter text design, so I'm going to take that off and I'm going to add that to a thin mount, and then I'm going to be using some IOD ink to ink that up, position it in the center, and then press down. Now obviously you could put whatever sort of text you want here. Spring would look beautiful, or the word nest. This is definitely something you can customize as well. I then used the leftover twine in the center there to tie a knot and attach the tag. Once I had that tag secured, I took out this white ruffled edge ribbon that I had in my stash. I think you can still get that from Amazon. And I'm going to tie a knot in the center. I have that position near the tag. And then I'm going to tie just a simple bow. And here's a look at our finished egg carton home decor. I love how this turned out, and the best part is it really was quite inexpensive to create this, and I think it would look beautiful in anyone's home. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my second project, I'm going to be using this coffee jar that I had in my stash. I'm also going to be using these little mini bird nests that I had in my stash. You can get these from a lot of different craft websites, but basically I wanted a larger nest, so I'm combining two of them. I've pulled them apart a little bit, and now I have them combined. I'm then going to start adding hot glue to the base of my jar on the inside, and then I'm going to begin adding some forest moss to the base. I'm going to just adjust that until I'm happy with how much is in there, and I'm just making sure it's stuck down. I then took some of this grapevine wreath that I had just left over from another craft. I wanted to almost look like a thin branch and combine it with the bird's nest. So I'm just working out the size here. I am going to trim it off, and then once I'm happy with how that looks, I'm then going to be using these little foam eggs. Now these are from a previous project. I just painted them in cream and did some brown little speckles on them, and I'm just going to glue those into the center of the bird's nest. As you can see, they still have some forest moss left over on them as well from a previous craft. I'm then going to add some glue to the grapevine stick that we are using, and I'm going to glue that together to the nest. I'm also going to be using this little feather that I got from the craft section at Spotlight Australia. Again, I'm sure you'd be able to find these on a site like Amazon. And then I'm going to carefully position that inside my jar. Now, thankfully the lid is sort of domed, so it's okay for that little stick to be taller than that. I'm then going to add this little dried baby's breath that I have. I really love to bring in different colors and different textures when I'm doing projects like this. And I'm just going to position that at the back, just a little bit behind the bird's nest. And then I have this little piece. This is actually from a floral wreath that I had left over. I'm going to bend it. It has florist wire in it. I'm going to bend it so it wraps around the front part of the nest and then curves up and sort of follows the same direction as our grapevine wreath stick that we're using. Once I'm happy with how our little natural spring style vignette is coming together, I'm going to add the lid back on. As you can see, there's plenty of room for our little sticks that we have sticking up there. Then I'm going to take this little washi tape that I had in my stash. It looks like a little tape measure. Again, you could probably find this on Amazon. And I'm going to wrap that around the top section of the lid. The lid just felt a little bit too plain. I wanted to dress it up a little bit, and I'm loving the vintage tone of these. It's also bringing in a little bit of text as well. So I'm just going to continue to wrap that around until I get to the other end of the tape, and then I'm going to use my scissors to cut that to size. Next, I'm going to be adding some twine around the top part of the jar. So this is not attached to the lid, it's just the top section of the jar. I'm wrapping that around the top several times, and then I'm going to cut that, and then I'm going to tie a double knot. Next, I took out Roycycled's pressed flowers decoupage paper. There's this really sweet little bunny style stamp, and I really want to make a tag for my little spring jar vignette. So I'm going to use another one of my tags, do just like I did for the first project, and cut that down so that it's just a better scale for my project. Then I'm going to be using Paint Couture's decoupage medium in matte. I'm going to lay down a coat of that. I'm not going to put any white paint underneath it. I like that it'll give it a bit of a darker vintage look. And then I'm going to press my decoupage paper on top of that wet medium, and then put another coat of that over the top. Now I did have a little gap there, so I'm just going to use a little bit more of the paper that was near this bunny design on the decoupage paper and use that to sort of fill in the gap. I let that dry completely, and then I came in with my scissors and I trimmed off the decoupage paper that was overlapping the outside of the tag. I also used a hole puncher to put another hole in the section that we covered over with the decoupage paper. To give the outside of the tag a bit more of a vintage look, I'm using some cocoa brown ink. This is an ink pad that I got from Amazon. If I can find the link for it, I will put it below. And then I used a wet wipe just to wipe back a little bit of that intensity and to soften that line. Next, I took out this little vintage style key that I had in my stash, and I'm going to be adding that and the tag to the twine. So I'm going to add the tag first, tie a double knot to secure that in place, and then I'm going to tie another knot to attach the key as well. And then I will be doing a bow with the twine when I'm done. And here's a look at our spring vignette in a jar. I think this turned out really sweet, and it's definitely something you can customize, and you could create different versions for different seasons out of just a simple glass jar. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my third project, I'm going to be using this curtain that I thrifted. I absolutely loved the fabric, and I have this little bunny template that I printed out from online, and I cut it to size. And here I'm just working out what part of the fabric I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using some pins to hold my template in place on my curtain fabric. And then once I have that all secured in place, I'm going to take my fabric scissors, and I'm actually just going to cut out a square of the curtain there, and then I'm going to go around and cut around the outside of the bunny. I am leaving about a 1 centimeter extra around my template. I then added the template to some backing material. This is like a calico style fabric that was already on the back of the curtain. So again, this is definitely a budget friendly craft. And I'm going to go around and sort of roughly cut that out. And then I'm going to cut in closer, because remember we did leave that extra around the outside. Once I have my fabric pieces ready, I'm going to be attaching the seams with hot glue. So this is a no-sew version of this craft. However, if you would prefer, you could definitely go in and hand stitch this or leave an extra seam around the outside and go in and use your sewing machine. I wanted this to be a really easy craft that anyone could do. So I'm just going to continue to go around and add that hot glue. I am adding it reasonably close to the edge of the sides, and I'm just going to continue to work my way around. This is definitely an easy craft that you could do with any kind of material that you have, maybe an old pillowcase, even some old clothes, an old quilt. It's definitely something that you could do to create some beautiful spring and Easter home decor on a budget. I am leaving a gap at the bottom of our little bunny there so that I can then come in and start using some fill from a brand new pillow that I bought. And I'm going to use that to fill our bunny and give him some form. So I am just sort of working in sections, making sure his little ears have enough fill in there, trimming off any sort of wayward strands. And I'm just going to continue until I have our little bunny all shaped and ready to go. And then I'm going to be going around double checking for any little gaps. You can see I'm just fixing one that's near the neck there. And then I'm also going to be filling in the bottom and then gluing back his little legs together. Once our little bunny cushion was finished, I took out this ruffled edge cream tone ribbon that I had in my stash. I'm going to tie a little bow around his neck. Again, this is the time when you can come in and you can customize this, or you could leave this part out. And here's a look at our no-sew bunny home decor. This was a quick and easy craft, but I think that our bunny looks very cute. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my final project today, I'm going to be using this little chicken template. I actually sketched this one out myself because I couldn't find one that I really liked. I'm laying this over the top of some calico style fabric, and I'm just going to use some pins to hold it in place while I cut around the template. Again, as I am cutting, I am leaving about a 1 to 2 centimeter extra gap around the edge of it. I did want my little chook there to be a little bit bigger, so I am keeping that in mind as I'm cutting out. And then I used the fabric as a template and went in and cutting closer to cut the back side of our chicken there. Now, just like in our previous craft, I am going to be using hot glue. So this is a no-sew craft. You could definitely come in and use your machine to do this part, or you could hand sew it. I'm just going in with some glue, and I'm going to work in sections to glue those sides together. I will then, of course, be leaving a gap down the bottom so that we can add some fill towards the end. I was going for a bit more of a primitive look here, which is why I picked the plainer fabric, but you could definitely come in and use maybe some sort of a floral fabric or buffalo check. It's really up to you and what style you want to create this in. Next, I'm going to begin adding the fill. Again, I'm going to work in sections, starting by adding fill to the head of our little hen there, and then I'm just going to continue to add that fill until I'm happy with how our chicken looks. Once I was happy with the shape of the hen, I used hot glue to seal the bottom. keeping things simple, I did then come in with a Sharpie, and I'm going to use that to draw on our little chicken's eye. I probably could have used a button or something like that, but I just didn't have anything on hand, and I think this worked out anyway. Next, I wanted to add a little pocket, so I'm just going to be using this little floral fabric that I thrifted, and I'm just going to be cutting a simple curved pocket design. So I just sort of kept cutting. I just sort of freehand this. I didn't use any kind of pattern. I just sort of continued to lay it on the chicken and make sure I was happy with the shape, and kept cutting until I was. I then went around the outside edge of the floral piece of fabric there, and I glued that in place. I then went in and started adding glue around the outside of the pocket, and then I started adding this trim piece that I had in my stash, and I'm just going to continue to add glue and glue that in place. I felt like this was a really nice sort of whimsical touch, and it definitely sort of made the pocket look a little bit more like it was sewn on, which of course that's definitely something you could do. Next, I want to add some florals. I started off with this larger design. I do end up taking it back out, but it was a good starting point. And then I started adding these lovely orange faux gypsophila style flowers, and I just sort of kept adding those until I was happy with that. And then I had these other little plain white florals. As I said before, in the end, I do end up taking out the larger one. And then I took out this green ruffled ribbon that I got from Amazon, and I'm going to be tying that around the neck. I really wanted to be able to bring in another color, and I think that this green ribbon is perfect for spring and Easter. You could definitely pick a different color though if this wasn't to your style. And here's a look at our finished fabric hen. This was another quick and easy project, but I think it turned out really sweet. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video and that it's given you some ideas on how you can make beautiful spring and Easter home decor on a budget. Let me know if you had a favorite project from today. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find some of the products used today on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.